Now, I don't know about you, but one of the best things for me about watching the movies is that feeling you get when you stumble onto one that has a killer cast. Not just one or two name faces that make us sit up and do the Leo points. I'm talking about those ensembles filled with wall-to-wall guys that make you go, hell yeah. Sometimes, though, there are films that have these kinds of casts that you may have missed or just forgotten. So, it's time to remember. I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and here are 10 movies you forgot had incredible casts.
But before we continue with this list, it's time for a quick shout out to our favorite sponsor, FanHome, and Marvel fans especially, you're gonna want to keep watching. FanHome is currently offering the chance for you to own your own little slice of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with its latest collection, which features iconic helmets, weapons, and artifacts as seen across Marvel Studios' fan favorite Infinity Saga. We've actually got Iron Man's helmet to show off for you right now, modeled on the armor worn by Robert Downey Jr. in Avengers Endgame, and as you can see, it's a pretty detailed package. The helmets featured in FanHome's Marvel collection are approximately 3 inches in height and made with metal and ABS. Each item included in the subscription also comes with a detailed magazine that explores both the on-screen and comics histories of these characters, highlighting fan-favorite comic book runs and moments from the movies. For Iron Man, that means lots of juicy info on his various armors, including the iconic bleeding edge look designed by artist Salvador Larroca. Those who subscribe to FanHome's Marvel Movie Replicas collection will receive bonus gifts too, including posters from the various Infinity Saga films, a Marvel Studios mug, Tony Stark's displayed arc reactor from the original Iron Man movie, and lastly, a 6-inch long replica of Thor's hammer Mjolnir. For more on FanHome's Marvel collection, be sure to check out the link in the video description. Thanks once again to FanHome for sponsoring this list, and now back to the video.
Number 10. The Professionals. Okay, so real talk. As far as Western ensembles go, obviously the one everyone is going to highlight is the Magnificent Seven. Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, James Coburn, Charles Bronson. It's a phenomenal cast, and one that features in what is a really solid riff on Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, with Elmer Bernstein's iconic score, the cherry on top. But the thing you may not know is that it's not actually the best men on a mission Western ensemble out there. No, that honor has to go to a little old movie called The Professionals. Released in 1966 and directed by Richard Brooks of In Cold Blood fame, The Professionals focuses on a group of former revolutionaries, gunmen, bounty hunters, and horse wranglers as they're hired by a rich landowner to go into Mexico and save his wife, who was kidnapped by a Mexican revolutionary to the group fought alongside years earlier. Solid so far, but take a look at the cast. Lee Marvin, Burt Lancaster, Robert Ryan, Woody Strode, Jack Palance, Claudia Cardinale, and Ralph Bellamy. The Professionals assembled just about the coolest bunch of dudes, and the best part is that the film is a secret masterpiece. A spirited lament for revolution that works as both a Vietnam allegory and as a damn good slice of Old West action. Gorgeously shot with some iconic sequences, plus 2 formidable performances from Marvin and Lancaster, including one of the greatest mic drop moments of dialogue the former ever got to utter in a screen role, and you're left with one of the greatest men on a mission movies ever made. Just one that still sadly gets overlooked in favor of the aforementioned ensemble. Number 9. Nixon. It's no secret that Oliver Stone's JFK boasted a killer cast, headed up by the likes of Kevin Costner, Tommy Lee Jones, Joe Pesci, Michael Rooker, Gary Oldman, Donald Sutherland, and so on and so forth. But there's an overlooked film in the director's filmography that boasts just as great a cast, and one I'm willing to wager that you either forgot or just missed entirely. Released in 1995, Nixon was a surprisingly sympathetic biopic dedicated to the controversial president, whose political career was defined by sudden, stunning success, but ended in the scandal of Watergate. Sweeping and retaining Stone's madcap, conspiracy-minded glint, Nixon may just be the filmmaker's most underrated work. It also features an all-star cast, led by Anthony Hopkins as Tricky Dick, and rounded out by the likes of James Woods, staple 90s that guy actor JT Walsh, Powers Booth, Joan Allen, David Hyde Pierce, Ed Harris, Bob Hoskins, Larry Hagman, and Paul Sorvino, who has the Kissinger impression nailed down to a scary degree. It's not JFK amazing, which Nixon would ironically probably be upset about, but it is great, and a cast like that is worth the price of admission alone. Don't miss out. Number 8. The Manchurian Candidate, 2004. Jonathan Demme's The Manchurian Candidate remake isn't as good as John Frankenheimer's Cold War era original. However, it's also just about the smartest way anyone could have remade that movie, updating the action from the post-Second Red Scare era to the War on Terror, where instead of the paranoia of communism looming large as the main metatextual element, it's terrorism, and all the jingoistic and hawkish neocon politics that became a fixture of the early 2000s. Demme's picture is a superb reminder of his technical ability, an assault on the senses that mirrors protagonist Major Burnett Marco's fractured memory, as well as his skill working with a talented ensemble. The Manchurian Candidate was headed up by Denzel Washington, one of the greatest actors of our time, not that you need me to remind you about that, with Meryl Streep, Jon Voight, Liev Schreiber, Vera Farmiga, Jeffrey Wright, Bruno Ganz, Ted Levine, Miguel Ferrer, and Dean Stockwell, all with either key roles or notable cameos. Oh, and there's also a small role for a young Anthony Mackie as well, years before he became a household fixture as Sam Wilson in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's a stacked cast that's easy to forget about given the original film is such a landmark, but don't miss out. Demme does some great stuff here, with Washington, Streep, and Liev Schreiber anchoring the film superbly. Number 7. Broken Arrow. Although John Woo arguably never reached the same heights in America that he did in Hong Kong, there were definitely efforts that came pretty close. At the top of that list for me is one of my fave films of all time, the 1993 Jean-Claude Van Damme starring Hard Target, whereas I know others will probably point towards something like Face Off instead. Valid, totally, but I do think one film has suffered from being sandwiched in between both those top-tier examples in Woo's filmography, and that is 1996's Broken Arrow. Co-starring Christian Slater and John Travolta, the latter of whom actually somehow managing to give a wilder performance than he did in Face Off, Broken Arrow is essentially a Woo neo-western, or neo-Woostern, which I'm gonna coin now. Slater and Travolta played two old friends in the US Air Force in command of a B-2 stealth bomber. Only the latter has plans to take the nukes himself, sparking a manhunt and a Die Hard-esque scenario where Slater, now grounded, has to team up with a local park ranger played by Samantha Mattis to undo the damage. Apart from the great action and one of Hans Zimmer's best scores, later recycled for Scream 2 as Dewey's theme, fun fact, Broken Arrow has a genuinely brilliant cast too. On top of Travolta, Slater, and Mattis, the film also features Bob Gunton, Delroy Lindo, Frank Whaley, Kurtwood Smith, Vondi Curtis Hall, and the cherry on top of the whole shebang, Daniel von Bargen, whom you Malcolm in the Middle fans will remember as Commandant Spangler, so gets lots of really good bonus points for that as well, because he's brilliant in that show. Number 6. The Firm. 1993 was a great year for the movies, and one of the low-key best dad vibes classics from that year is The Firm, a Tom Cruise vehicle adapted from a John Grisham novel directed by Sidney Pollack, who shot to fame in the 70s for trailblazing efforts like The Yakuza with Robert Mitchum and 3 Days of the Condor with Robert Redford. Oh, and he also directed a little old film called Tootsie 2, so yeah, pretty talented guy. The Firm may not stand out as top-tier Pollock to a lot of people, but this is one of my faves from an already personally beloved year of cinema. Centered around Cruise's character, who joins a prestigious law firm only to discover some unnerving goings-on, The Firm also counted among its talents Gene Triplehorn, Gene Hackman, Holly Hunter, Hal Holbrook, Ed Harris, David Strathern, Wilford Brimley, Gary Busey, Dean Norris, and the Jigsaw Killer himself, Tobin Bell. Truly a cast stacked with wall-to-wall great guys. Do yourself a favor and watch it if you haven't already, as it feels like a fairly overlooked film in Cruise's filmography today. Number 5. Twilight, 1998. Most definitely not to be confused with the 2008 vampire movie that kicked off the careers of our beloved Robert Pattinson and Kirsten Stewart, Twilight from 1998 is a quirky, sort of unremarkable neo-noir led by a killer cast of Hollywood legends and some beloved figures in bit roles. Led by Paul Newman, who plays a private detective caught in a sticky situation between his old friends and clients, Gene Hackman and Susan Sarandon respectively, Twilight's cast also comprises the likes of Hollywood hero James Garner, Giancarlo Esposito, a post-Scream Liev Schreiber, Reese Witherspoon, Stockard Channing, Margot Martindale, John Spencer, and M. Emmett Walsh. The film itself is kind of low energy, with moments of devastation and excitement, but is totally worth it just to see the main triumvirate of players together. Newman, Sarandon, and Hackman all have great chemistry, while supporting turns from Schreiber again and Esposito are plenty charming too. Number 4. Sneakers. Oh man, I love Sneakers, and you would probably love it too if you haven't already seen it, if it was more talked about. A brilliantly warm and entertaining 90s espionage comedy, Sneakers was directed by Phil Alden Robinson and featured a cast comprised of Robert Redford, Sidney Poitier, Mary McDonnell, Ben Kingsley, Dan Aykroyd, River Phoenix, David Strathairn, and James Earl Jones. Oh, and Donal Logue also shows up here for like a scene or two, which, for all my fellow Donal Logue appreciators out there, is a pretty neat bonus. Sneakers is a total delight, the definition of a comfort film with an all-star cast, and yet one I strangely don't see many people talking about. Maybe I'm in the wrong circles, I don't know, but from where I'm currently sitting, it feels really overlooked. Number 3. The Martian. Ridley Scott's The Martian is a gripping, intriguing, and downright visually striking movie based on the Andy Weir novel. This sci-fi flick was one of the best-rated films of 2015 and brought a surprising amount of realism and humor to the surface, mainly because of Matt Damon's chemistry with himself throughout the movie. Clocking in at almost 2.5 hours in length, The Martian gives us plenty of time to get acquainted with Damon and his magnificent range as an actor. But on rewatches, you can really appreciate this out-of-this-world cast even more. The extent of the supporting cast is phenomenal and highly underappreciated. The film boasts several big names, including Jessica Chastain, Kristen Wiig, Jeff Daniels, Kate Mara, and Mackenzie Davis. Not to mention the likes of Sebastian Stan, Michael Pena, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Benedict Wong, and Donald Glover, then only having recently departed his breakout role as Troy in Community. Matt Damon may have been lost in the stars, but he was certainly surrounded by them on Earth. It's sort of easy to forget that though. You spend so much time alone with Damon in the movie, and the propulsive nature of his performance that keeps us invested, that all the other figures just sort of bleed into the background when you remember it. It's very much his movie, but he was supported by some brilliant talents along the way. Number 2. Anchorman 2: The Legend Continues. No matter your own mileage with Will Ferrell, there's no denying the first Anchorman's place as an icon of early 2000s comedy. Endlessly quotable and totally chaotic, it's an easy highlight from Ferrell's career and one we keep coming back to 20 years since its release. Oh god, it should be illegal for the 2000s to feel that old. Anyway, a decade after its premiere, Anchorman 2: The Legend Continues dropped in theaters and wasn't quite as good, but still pretty funny. Also, I entered a contest when that movie came out to go to the premiere and won like a whole crate of Tango with Ron Burgundy's face on it, so thanks for the memories, Anchorman 2, I guess. Cast-wise, all the faves were there. Will Ferrell, Paul Rudd, Steve Carell, David Koechner, and Christina Applegate all came back for the second, with the late great Fred Willard backing them up. But then Dylan Baker, Megan Good, Kristen Wiig, Chris Parnell, and even Harrison Ford all signed on. Further cameos came from the likes of Marion Cotillard, Will Smith, Kirsten Dunst, Jim Carrey, Tina Fey, Liam Neeson, Amy Poehler, John C. Reilly, and Vince Vaughn. Ultimately, the reason why this roster ends up being more forgotten than its predecessor is simply down to it not being as good, as well as the fact the cameos are themselves pretty brief. Still a highlight though, and while it may not be as good as the OG, it does have that pretty funny bit in the Winnebago, so shout out to Anchorman 2 for that as well. And number 1. Extreme Prejudice. Look, I know this list has been nothing but Ewan lists a bunch of guys and gets excited, but trust me, this one is special. Nick Nolte, Rip Torn, Michael Ironside, Powers Booth, Clancy Brown. These are the guys who lead Walter Hill's immaculate neo-western action film Extreme Prejudice, which released in 1987 and saw the director pay homage to the Wild Bunch and deliver one of the coolest movie premises of all time. Nick Nolte is Jack Bentine, a Texas Ranger who's tackling drug runners in the border region along with his old mentor, Sheriff Hank Pearson, played by Rip Torn. Meanwhile, a shadowy off-the-books military outfit headed up by Ironside's Major Paul Hackett is also getting involved. And the guy responsible for all the drug running? Why, it's Bentine's old childhood buddy, Cash Bailey, played by Powers Booth. I don't think you need me to explain why this is cool, it just is. Genuinely one of the most slept-on action films of the 80s and one of Hill's best works. Probably just behind The Warriors as maybe his best film. Cowboy vibes meets 80s action with squibs aplenty. Undoubtedly overshadowed by bigger pictures at the time, but it deserves a stronger reputation. Also, has anyone had a cooler name than Rip Torn or Powers Booth? I don't think so.